Well, I mean, we expect him right around that million job creation mark. However, our primary focus is on leisure and hospitality
Okay.
hiring because of its direct impact that it has on food and also energy. And, you break that numbers down into specific commodities. You've got bean oil up 46%, lean hogs up 42%, corn up 33. Then focus on the energies, gas up 28%. So big demand right there. So if we see this big hiring number, that impact on commodities is right there.
Yeah, a lot of focus on the service sector. We'll be keeping a close eye on that in terms of the recovery efforts there. Another week of returns for those, as you kind of touched on there, positioned, or I should say for those who have positioned themselves with the trends to the upside in terms of commodities, Phil, energies. You mentioned grains. We were just talking about metals, copper, silver, gold, palladium for that matter, on the move higher. Can you speak to what's behind some of the momentum to the upside?
Yeah, if you look at the copper market, that's been one of the one that, really up 97% if you go from 1 year ago today to where we're at. So that strong Chinese data, that's what pushed it up another 10 cents in the overnight market. You do have a bit of a fight going on. It's a tax fight between down in Chile, some of the producers and that government. And we've seen that kind of effect take place in other commodities as well, like coffee producers fighting with Colombian governments. So the all-time high is also in the speculators. You're seeing everyone just try and jump on this commodity super cycle we're seeing. So copper futures, no telling how high they're going to go. I mean, we're not picking tops or bottoms here, but I do want to say that any kind of correction that we do get, you're definitely going to want to start looking at the long side again.
Noted, and I think that's smart in terms of not picking tops, in terms of the trend environment we've been seeing to the upside right now. We're in uncharted territory, and that would be just kind of throwing darts essentially at this point. I like what you said in terms of just kind of being patient and waiting for a buy opportunity as long as the trend remains to the upside. Let's talk about, in addition to the commodities you mentioned, you've got lumber prices on the rise here. I mentioned at the top of the show, if we get a really strong data point this week in terms of the monthly data, as far as the jobs numbers, it really kind of shifts attention back towards the Fed in terms of, are they going to have to become a little bit less accommodative, or similar to what we've seen in terms of Bank of Canada, are they going to shift some of that attention in the asset purchases? Are we going to hear a little bit of a different sentiment if we see a very strong number today, do you think, Phil?
We saw that the ripple effect in, when Janet Yellen had said that they may have to raise rates for an overheated economy. That big fall, that decline needed to be bought because remember, she's not part of the Fed, she's part of the Treasury. So she doesn't make those kind of decisions. Jerome Powell does. And so when they will do it is they're going to have to come out with something like a Jackson Hole type meeting and indicate that they may pull back the reins. It's going to be one of those, and they're going to say that it's extremely gradual, and then you'll see the effect on the forward meetings. However, we stay the course at the moment. The cycle still indicates that we're going to go up. We should press all-time highs on all these equities, the equity indices, and many of the commodities out there are still going to have strong demand. And it's really a supply chain problem that's really caused many of these commodities. And that you mentioned lumber, that was specifically the first one. We saw that breakdown in the US-Canadian border. We saw social distancing at the sawmills that reduced the supply. The supply chain issue came in with freight being strained, and then everyone gets the stimulus checks. They go to Home Depot, they start buying all the lumber there is, they start relocating. That lumber demand's there. We're still seeing that kind of effect. So prices are going higher. Lumber, though, I do got to advise a bit of caution that that contract is very thinly traded, often sees limit moves and expanded limit moves. So not for the novice investor by any means.
I want to just pull a couple charts here real quick to kind of provide some visuals to Phil's point there. He was talking about the dip that we saw related to, and again, it was an interesting development this week, Phil, in terms of Janet Yellen. She really was speaking out of both sides of her mouth. Seemed like within the same day, two separate interviews. Again, the dip lower, as Phil mentioned, was a buy opportunity, and we talked about this earlier in the show in terms of the daily time frame. Here you could see those dips and characteristic of the trend we've been seeing have been and continue to be buy opportunities. And And then here's just a quick look at that parabolic move that you were just mentioning in terms of lumber. Phil, a lot of focus on commodities to the upside, and and actually wrote about this yesterday. I'm sort of wondering, can this continue here in terms of demand? I mean, obviously, if we see support from the strong economic data, one could argue that it could. But my question is, can it continue if we just see the dollar kind of sideways? Because ultimately, you'd like to see a weaker dollar sort of contribute to some of this momentum to the upside. But I guess if we continue to see strong numbers here in the U.S. and globally, in theory, one could argue we don't need the U.S. dollar. Where do you stand on this one?
The dollar indicated a big signal, lower high on the chart. So if you look, we are declining right now on the dollar again. We should see that pressure, and really it's other commodity-based currencies that are going to start pushing up. All the safety currencies, they haven't recovered, like Japanese yen, Swiss franc, but your Canadian dollar, your Australian dollar, New Zealand dollar, all these are starting to push up. It's putting some pressure on the U.S. dollar. The correlations have been there. It's been like negative 70 to 80% with many of the commodities, whereas the dollar goes down, the underlying commodity goes up. We're especially seeing that with like Bitcoin. Some of the cryptocurrencies have strong inverse correlations. So I don't know what's going to stop the dollar. Maybe when the Fed does get a bit more hawkish, or some of these real numbers are already baked in the cake as far as spending and things like that. That's when you'll maybe see the dollar pause its decline, just like treasuries had paused their yield rise at the moment. But I believe that it's just temporary, and there's going to be a next wave finishing off this quarter really strong.
Phil, a great reminder to not only keep an eye on the U.S. dollar in terms of the influence that some of these commodities have and the relationship they share with some of the other currencies. We're looking at the crude oil and the Canadian dollar here. You can see, and we've been pointing out how the Canadian's been very strong relative or associated with this move to the upside. Here you can see up and through the 8,200 level this week. That was a sharp move higher, and we did see Canadian, the Bank of Canada recently tapering some of those asset purchases. And then, Phil, last thoughts. I wanted to get your opinion on this. Every time I come into work every single morning, I keep looking at more and more cars on the roads, on the road on Lakeshore Drive, more cars waiting at these stoplights than we've seen in months. It seems like every day. And I'm looking at gasoline prices with, cities reopening. In theory, this should be one of the drivers to the upside. We know it's summer driving season coming around the corner here, and still a lot of people reluctant to get on planes and travel through that form. I mean, ultimately, should we be watching gasoline prices? Should we be watching that relationship with RBOB and crude oil?
Yeah, and you also got to have that relation with number of people fully vaccinated. I believe it's like right around like 32.8 million people. Now, there are people that are, hesitant to do it, but more people are being comfortable as their friends and colleagues get it done. You're going to see as they become more vaccinated. There's a lot of people that I'll talk to them and say, hey, we should travel somewhere. And they're going to say, hey, I'm going to wait till I get fully vaccinated before I do that. So as that curve goes up, you'll see gasoline prices, other energies start to follow it. Gas up 28% year to date. Want to note that. Crude oil still in a bit of a trading range. Hasn't broke out to the upside. OPEC is in charge of producing some more supply, so they could dampen that upward wind up higher.